So I grew up in a little tiny town in Texas, and it's really part of the Bible Belt, and I believe that that specific town is in the Guinness Book of World Records for the most churches per capita. As you can imagine, I mean, people said they went to church just to be part of the popular crowd, and it got to be so commonplace that the word God was just a part of everything, like God bless America. I mean, we were in Texas, you know what I mean? So it was more like it put God in the place of serving us. Also, growing up in Texas, I just felt out of place. Being there, I just didn't fit in, and I wanted something different, and I wanted something more. So I decided to start playing music, and playing music was a kind of a rebellious thing. I was playing pop-punk music, we're like jumping around. We had a little bit of success, a little small band called Fontaine in Texas, and other bands noticed us, took us out on tour. We started traveling the United States. So then, after that kind of ended, there was a band here from San Diego that had reached out to me to maybe fill in for the summer for them, and I jumped on the chance. From then, when I joined, things started kind of taking off. We got a lot of cool opportunities, man. Like, we got to do Ozfest. I think that same tour of Ozfest, Iron Maiden was headlining, and Black Sabbath, like they had gotten back together for that. We got taken out to dinner from Capitol Records, and they took us up to the roof and kind of showed us, like, this is what you could have. People are always looking up to those kind of things, like, oh man, I wish I could be in a band that's that big. We hosted some shows on MTV, and I remember coming back home and people were like, you're the coolest guy I know. You've like tasted like what's like the life, you know? And I thought that was. I was like, man, this is the life. But as fun as that was in the moment, you know, it was pretty like lonely and pretty dark. So I would seek out other things. You know, I kind of started drinking a little bit around that time, and you know, things started slowly slipping. So I just made these really bad compromises, and I'm laying in a bunk thinking like, this can't be it, and I don't want this to be like my legacy. So I decided to stop playing music and pursue another like life that was what I saw to be like this pinnacle of what cool is. And so I started being a hairdresser. I started being like a hair cutter, and again, like traveling and like teaching and doing all these things. And I started to live by the ocean. You know, I live like a half block from the beach. You know, again, I try to have this like ultimate lifestyle. I wound up being in a relationship that I thought all these little pieces together, being like this, you know, insta-famous hairdresser, surfing on the weekend, skateboarding all the time, riding the coolest motorcycle I could. You know, I thought that was it, you know, and I had a wife that loved me and that I loved her. And, you know, again, there was something missing. It was like these little puzzle pieces that didn't quite fit together, but they look like somewhat of an image and you can kind of get it. But it wasn't whole and it wasn't complete. So I let alcoholism kind of run my life a little bit. I remember going like 3 years without not having a drink. I just remember drinking, you know, so much until it was the morning. And that really started like this kind of spiral in my life. I lost that marriage relationship because of it, and here I am alone again. You know, I'm not in a bunk this time, but I'm in a bed by myself, and I knew something had to change.
So I grew up with a mom and dad and one sister, and we went to church regularly, and it was in 7th grade that my dad left. He had been having affairs on my mom. He left and I started junior high, and I remember it being a really difficult year. We lost our house, and me and my sister and mom had to move in with my grandparents, and we all shared one bed. And I started drinking. I started smoking, shoplifting, just a bunch of stuff. And it just progressively got worse through high school. I then started doing acid and coke and drinking all the time. I got pregnant by a guy the first time I slept with him. So I scheduled an abortion. I ended up getting so dehydrated that my dad came to check on me and found me passed out. They did a sonogram. They weren't supposed to. I saw the baby and I decided against it. I stopped drinking. I stopped the drugs during my pregnancy, and I fell in love with the son I was carrying. I brought my son home on Christmas Day, and 3 weeks later, I was working at Deja Vu. And one night, a friend of mine came in from high school and offered me a line of meth, and I went in the bathroom, snorted it, and I was instantly hooked. I went an entire year and a half without missing a single day. What started off as a few lines a day turned into continually needing it, thinking about it all the time. Like, it didn't matter what I was doing, if I was sick, had the flu, taking my kid to Disneyland, like, it was horrible, it sucked. Like, I realized that I was an addict. It scared me. I felt like suffocating, like I just felt like I didn't see a way out. I get a phone call and it's my dad, and he tells me that he has been arrested and that he is gonna have to walk himself into prison and serve 22 years. I remember not being able to focus. I was in shock. One night I was just in the dressing room and I just kept crying, and I just kept putting my makeup on, and all night I couldn't even get it on to go out in the club, and they just sent me home. And I went home and I called my dad and I said, I need you to come here. You know, I remember him driving in the truck and I could hear him pull into, you know, the driveway, and all of a sudden he just started witnessing to me, and he was like, daughter, you know, you need to change your life. Like, you're gonna end up in a cell like me if you don't change. A week went on, and then one morning I woke up, I did a line like normal, and I was like, I'm gonna turn myself in. And I called my boyfriend and my mom, and I said, I'm a meth addict and I need help.
So I feel that I had a pretty solid and like really cushy lifestyle growing up. Like, I had a solid Christian family. I started out at a Christian school when I was younger. I went to church my entire life. In high school, I was really involved with our high school ministries and stuff, and I understood a lot of things and I learned a lot of things about the Bible. I never allowed it to set its place in my heart. At this point, in my relationship with God, everything was really performance. Like, I knew the things to say, I knew it was like what was expected of me, but I didn't know Jesus, and he didn't have a hold on my heart. When I was growing up, I had this big, huge, like, I don't know, hole almost in my heart, and it's like emptiness. But there's all these distractions that kind of led me away from ever really acknowledging it, because there were so many things to fill it with. There were people and friends, romantic relationships, distracted me from really knowing that emptiness, and I'd experience it, but I always like run away from it. Once I got to college, all really came front and center, and I like couldn't escape this emptiness that had been building up inside me. Got into this place where I was just in this despair, and I had this conflict in my relationship with God, and like I said, there's nothing in my heart, and I kind of just said no, like I don't want anything to do with this. And since I had all this freedom and a new place, and started trying to explore new ways to fill that emptiness, and started drinking for the first time, I tried to get involved with the party scene. I tried to fill it with more other romantic relationships, and I just got emptier and emptier, and I just got to this place where I was just like, living was like exhausting. I just had like these thoughts of like ending my life and stuff, and it was just like this horror, like really dark place that I like just never imagined that I'd ever be at. Even when I was like with a group of people, like I just felt like no one was there with me, and I was scared to like even share any of that, because I thought like, man, if I tell people that like I want to like die, then I'm gonna be a huge burden, and like people aren't gonna want to like be around me, or they're gonna think I'm like really over dramatic or whatever. And then I always know people would like say stuff like, oh, you know, like suicide is like cowardly, and like wanting to like kill yourself is like something that a coward does. And like after like wanting to like end my life every day, I just like had this shift, and I thought to myself like, I can't like stay here anymore.
So during that same like kind of season of loneliness and darkness, one of the things that I'd picked up was this book by John Piper called God is the Gospel. In the beginning of that book, John Piper really lays out this question: if you could have all the pleasures of the world, all these things that you love to do but on a heightened sense, all the food that you could ever have, all the relationships that you could ever have, and even like your family is there to spend it with you. Would you be okay if God wasn't there? My answer popped into my head really quick, and it was yes. I'd be happy if God wasn't there. And so I started to think about like, well, then what do I actually believe? Am I just chasing like this happiness to make me feel better, or am I chasing God because of who God is? And obviously at the time it put in perspective and put like an x-ray on what my heart really felt, and it was really myself. I was on the throne of my own life. I was the one making the decisions, and God was just the coat that made it look good. And so I started this transformation of denying myself and letting my old self die. I remember reading, I even read it this morning, Romans 6:6, talking about if we're really dead and we can put that old life to death, we would be a new creature. We'd be something different. And that's the time when I really switched places. I took the crown of me being king of my life and handed it over.
I just remember waking up and reading my Bible at that time, and I felt amazing. It was probably the second week of being sober, thinking, wow, this feels really good. Not to wake up and depend on the meth to function. And I remember just looking at myself in the mirror, and I looked different. It was such a weird feeling. I just remember like, wow, I feel good. I took my 4 kids and I went to the Edge, and it was a Sunday night. Checked them all in, walk in, somebody greets me, hands me a paper. I sit down, it's like foggy and dark, and I just felt good that night. And I looked down at my paper and it says deja vu, not going back. And I just lost it. Like, I knew God was speaking to me. I just remember crying and telling him, I surrender. This time I surrender fully and everything to you.
I started going to Young Life at Arizona State with my friends. I was still kind of doing the same things like alcohol and drugs and stuff, and somehow it just kind of like started like coming to me like I liked home. I eventually just decided like I'm just gonna go back. And I came back and I started going to the Jordan. And I remember we were talking about belonging and about like God doesn't just like love you, like he likes you. Somewhere in that like it clicked for me that all of this wasn't about me, and it wasn't about performance, and it wasn't about what other people thought of me. It was about God seeing me as righteous, and it was about him looking at me and saying that I have value, and there's nothing that I could be feeling or thinking about myself that could possibly turn him away from me. And like when I was in this place where I wanted to end my life, he looked at me, he didn't call me a coward, he called me a son.
So fast forward a few years later, once God really started to awaken my heart and kind of break apart all these hardened pieces that I had done to myself over time. During that time I had met Lauren. We fell in love and decided to get married. And that was one of the coolest things, looking back at, my previous life. And even if my wife went away, even if my baby boy wasn't with me anymore, and I didn't live in Southern California, I didn't ride a motorcycle, and I didn't do all these things, my hope and my joy, my source of joy is in Christ and Christ alone. Because that's the ultimate. The only reason those things are even good is because he is in them. So I still, I'm in love with my wife. I'm still pursuing her. My child, I'm raising him the best I can and praying over him every night. Still ride a motorcycle, still skateboarding almost every day, and surfing as much as I can. And I'm still a hairdresser, and a haircutting educator. So it's not that I took those things out of my life. It's that God redeemed those things and repurposed them. So now I worship him with those things.
I think people don't understand the measures of his grace. I know it's what saved my life over and over. And just his love for me, his goodness, is unmeasurable. And it's not out of obligation or guilt or fear that I serve him, you know. It is out of the fact that he would send his son down to die, you know, for me. And it's so easy to look at it like, oh, he saved us. It's so easy to do that. But if it was just me, you know, he would still do it. And, you know, I went through a season where I just had to focus on that and really just say, no, me, like he loves you. It's been the most rewarding for me is to see the reflection we have when we are a light, to bring those people to the Lord that necessarily wouldn't come to church, the family members that, you know, don't believe in God, but they believe your story. They know you. They know your change. They see your testimony. They know something is different about you, and there's no denying it.
Man, if I have to describe my life now, it's like nothing I would ever imagine it to be. I'm doing like so many cool things. Like I get to play music every weekend, and I get to do it for God. I have these incredible friendships and people that like root for me all the time, and I'm just like so hyped on him, and he's just like totally changed my life. I guess I could just say, yeah, if I could describe my life now, it's just sick.